book lovers everywhere. I'm E-Train, and welcome to a spooky edition of E-Train Talks. When trying to figure out who to interview for my spooktacular Halloween podcast episode, I decided the spookier and creepier the book cover, the better. So it was a pretty easy and awesome choice. I've not seen many covers this Halloween-worthy, and as Halloween-worthy as Tyler Miller's ghoulish covers. From skulls to graveyards to skeletons to, burying the living. I'm super excited to welcome Tyler Miller. And this is my first Halloween episode. And I'm just thrilled to have Tyler on because he is an educator, a former educator, and journalist turned author. And also, he's a literacy advocate, which is awesome. He's the founder of Reluctant Reader Books, LLC, which specializes in publishing and promoting books written and designed for kids who don't like to read. Well, after reading Tyler's books, they're going to start liking reading. And his works include the Nevermore series for younger readers, as well as 2 short story collections for adults. And I've spoken about Tyler's book covers, but I have to admit, his stories are pretty creepy too, and downright thrilling. Nothing too scary for the average middle grader to handle. We can handle it, kids. And after reading We Bury the Living, I can tell you firsthand that I see why even the most reluctant of readers would enjoy Tyler's reads. Full of adventure, scares, and all-around awesomeness. So let's get this spooky edition underway. Thank you so much for joining me today, Tyler.
Thank you for having me on, and thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Well, thank you for coming.
I'm glad you enjoyed the covers.
Yeah, they're awesome, and the titles as well are very captivating, and they made me want. They made me go like, I want to know where this story goes, and they went in a very exciting way.
So I'm glad you enjoyed them. Yeah, I spent a lot of time pondering book titles and stuff, and then was very lucky to be able to find a illustrator who did the covers. I think I spent a number of months looking at different artists on Pinterest mostly, and eventually came across the illustrator. I forget his real name. He works under the name Butcher Billy. That was kind of creepy. Yeah, it's kind of a creepy name. And he does a whole lot of really fantastic art. And was lucky to run into him, and he had the time and space to do the covers for me.
Yeah, and Billy the Butcher, I assume that he's not a butcher, but he certainly butchered up quite amazing covers. And now I'm excited to get into the questions, and my first one is also a bit of a statement. So I read We Bury the Living, and I have to admit, I was a little bit weary about reading it, as I'm not a fan of horror, but then I remembered I'm a big fan of spooky. And your book cover is a bit on the creepy side, but since I really wanted to get a feel for your storytelling style before our talk, and also kind of dive into some different genres and kind of storylines that have not really dived. Yeah, that's weird. Anyway, I took a chance and I loved your story. I was totally engrossed, and your writing is super fun and engaging, and I love the ending of We Bury the Living. Even my mom was surprised, and because I had her read the book, like I told her, you got to read these last few chapters, and she was like, her expression told the story, and I was really curious to know, where did you get the inspiration to write about kids being brought back to life and kids being buried while they were alive?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm glad your mom enjoyed it as well. I think originally that particular story, there's an old black and white horror film called I Bury the Living, which I clearly stole the title from. And in that movie, there's a gentleman who is working at a very large graveyard, and they have this giant map on the wall where all the different crypts and tombs and graves are all on there, and some of them are occupied. They have like black pins little thumbtacks they put in for those, and then they have other spaces that are open, and they have a different color pin. for the ones that haven't been used yet. And some people purchase a plot in advance. And one day this guy he puts a pin in to one, but he puts it in the wrong spot. And he puts one into somebody who's got one that they paid for in advance, but they're not dead yet. And that person dies like the next day. And so, and that creeps him out. And then he does it again, like intentionally, to just see what would happen. And then another person dies. And so it's kind of an entertaining movie. And I think I had remembered that film was one I had enjoyed, and it kind of got me going thinking about graveyards and kind of some spooky supernatural kind of things. But I wanted to write it for kids, obviously, and so I was trying to think of ways to do that in a more kid-friendly fashion. And then I think I mixed in some stuff just from real life. There's in the story there, the characters, they have like a path, a walkway that leads up to their house, a stone path, and the stones are actual grave markers. And there's actually a friend of mine who has that same thing at her house. She doesn't live next to a cemetery, but her walkway is actual grave markers that they took from somewhere. I don't really have an explanation for that one, but just little things like that you mix together.
The way the town was described, where Finn and his younger sister went to stay for vacation in We Bury the Living, really set the stage for the tone of the story. Now, were you writing about any place in particular, or was the description kind of straight from your imagination or in the movies that you watched? Or is there maybe a creepy house on the hill nearby?
Most of the description of the town of Nevermore is based on my hometown, which is in Washington State. It's a little town called Lake Chelan. Lake Chelan's actually a very nice place. It's a very tourist place on a really beautiful lake. Wonderful summers and autumns and so on. Lots and lots of people come here to hang out and go on the water and all that kind of stuff. So I had taken that in a lot of my memories, more of it when I was a child, growing up, and then just made it a little creepier than it is in real life. It's not a very spooky place in real life, but that wouldn't be much fun in the book. So,
yeah. We Bury the Living takes place in the not creepy place.
Yeah.
That doesn't really fit the title, so I'm glad that you added that little bit of a spin to it. And my dad is from Washington State. Do you know where is it located in?
Chelan is in the middle of the state on the eastern side of the mountains. So it's in a very deep valley, kind of in a deserty area. If you're up in the valley, there's the lake, and then if you go out of the valley, you can come down and go down to Columbia River Valley.
Now, I know that we should be talking about the book, but do you know, are you close to Wenatchee? That's where my dad grew up.
We are about 40 miles from Wenatchee.
Okay.
So if he grew up in Wenatchee, I'd be surprised if he never got out to Chelan.
I think he did. That name rings a bell. And yeah, along with being an author, one of the cool things that I discovered is, you're a champion for literacy. Woo, champion. So you write books that help spark a passion for reading in kids who've not really yet discovered the magic of stories. And your books are, in a way, pretty magical in their own way. So can you share a bit about your journey into becoming a literacy advocate, going from a journalist to an author, and creating Reluctant Reader Books, LLC?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I started out in teaching and had worked with kids for a number of years in a variety of capacities in the classroom, in summer school programs, as a teen center director, just in a number of different ways, and was constantly running into something that I think every teacher deals with, which is that there's a small group of kids like yourself who really enjoy reading. There's a small group of kids who just absolutely hate reading. And then there's a large group of kids in the middle who maybe reading is, it's all right, but it's not really something that they, maybe not their first choice or second choice or even their third choice. And so you're constantly, especially if you're teaching English, dealing with reluctant readers and trying to convince them, to pick up a book and get through it and stuff. So I was in that world for a long time and had dealt with that, but I had always wanted to be a writer. And most of my adulthood, I had wanted to write books for adults. And eventually, I had this idea. I was working in an office in Spokane, and I would take my lunch breaks and go a couple blocks to this bookstore, this very large bookstore there in Spokane, and would just kind of hang out there, for a while and walk around. And I had eventually wandered into the kids section and thought, man, one, I thought these books look a lot more fun actually than the adult section. I thought it'd be more entertaining to read. But as I was going through there one day, it occurred to me that I didn't see a lot of stuff that would likely appeal to a lot of the students that I had worked with. Like there was lots and lots of really great books. I mean, as you know, there's tons of great books out there right now. But many of them are really for readers who are a little bit more advanced, or they're just more avid readers. I take Harry Potter, which is fantastic, but I mean, like the last few books are just gigantic, right? And so it's often intimidating for a kid who doesn't really enjoy reading very much. And so at that time I thought, well, I wonder if I could write a book that might appeal to these kids that I had worked with in the past, and would be more on their speed as far as kind of the length of the book and the style of the story and the length of the chapters. And so that kind of got me going in that direction. And then once I was in that space and trying to think about, well, how do we get these books out to people and support that whole process, as a writer, I really thought I wanted to do more than just the books themselves. I also wanted to try and build something that would be like a platform and a resource for teachers and parents and librarians who get books into the hands of kids. And so that out of that came Reluctant Reader Books, which is a business, a publishing business. I've only published my books, but it's a publishing company. And then our website is really kind of devoted to that particular angle and stuff of helping kids who aren't super thrilled about reading get into reading.
Yeah, I love that. And Reluctant Reader Books, they offer, well, Tyler offers a lot for starters, some prompts, some amazing recommendations, and of course that's where you can find We Bury the Living, Death Cab, and The 13th Floor. And Reluctant Reader Books is an astounding place, and if you're a teacher or librarian and you have reluctant readers, you should definitely go check out Reluctant Reader Books. And who knows, maybe there will be some more books published in Reluctant Reader Books. And is that happening? I'm curious to know.
Yeah, we do have some plans for additional books. The Nevermore books that you have there, I actually wrote, I think 7 of them. Wow. And then when we started this process of saying, okay, we wanted to publish them and stuff, we actually initially, I had sent them out to literary agents and publishing houses and stuff. And we got some good response, but over and over again, the response that we got back was like, well, the books are good, but we would like them to be longer and more complicated and so on. And at some point, I kind of had to decide whether I wanted to go that direction and kind of let go of some of this concept of really being for reluctant readers, or just kind of say, well, I guess if no one else wants to do it, I'm going to have to do this on my own. And so we obviously went with self-publishing and getting them out there and stuff. But yeah.
Well, how did you create your own publishing company? It seems like a lot of work and something you can't just Rome wasn't built in a day, and certainly a publishing company.
Yeah, it's there's luckily I think these days it's easier than someone might imagine. I think 30-40 years ago the hill to climb would have been much taller. Right now there's a lot of stuff that used to be very expensive and very difficult, and you would need a whole lot of people involved. The technology has kind of come to a place where you can do these things much cheaper, or you can get a hold of tools where you can do things yourself. We did a lot of stuff in-house. And then occasionally we would run into something that just we couldn't, like, I'm a writer, not an illustrator. And so I had to go find an illustrator. But it's, it's a matter of setting up a business and then figuring out the tools that you need and what are you going to, what do you need for all these things? So you need something that can do the interior designs and the put together the entire jacket for the book, not just the front cover. And then a lot of this is then, you upload all these files and you figure out, well, there's different places that you can publish, like you can publish through Amazon, which we did. So you can order the books on Amazon. There's another distributor called Ingram, which distributes to bookstores and to libraries and stuff. And so you can load up into their system. And so someone could go to their local library and request the books, or their local bookstore and get a copy if they wanted. But yeah, there's a lot of resources out there, and people who are in this world are very, very generous. They're very generous with their time and their knowledge. And so we were definitely benefited from the help of many people who've done this before.
After reading your book and getting totally captivated by the story, I'm hooked. And I love all the twists and turns and surprises. Your story was seriously a page-turning roller coaster of spooky fun. And my question to you is, out of all the different genres out there, what made you decide to write kind of spooky/scary stories? Granted, you clearly have a knack for it.
Oh man, I've always enjoyed spooky stories. Even when I was a kid, I really liked stuff that was a little bit on the creepier, darker side, like Roald Dahl and R.L. Stine, Christopher Pike. A lot of writers who were just kind of in that world, and it's hard to say precisely why. I've also, there's other things I liked quite a bit as well. Mystery stories and Hardy Boys and adventure novels and so on. But I think as I got older, I read quite a bit. You kind of graduate up, big Stephen King fan, that kind of thing. So when I was thinking about writing for kids, I really wanted something that I thought would be appealing and something that I would really enjoy writing. And so that was kind of came naturally.
Well, it certainly did come naturally. And yeah, my dad is currently reading some Stephen King books on his Kindle, and he's also a pretty big spooky fan, although he also reads a lot of business books that I find extremely boring and sometimes interesting. So there's a lot of variety. And a couple of months ago, you interviewed me on your literacy website, and I really enjoyed answering the interesting questions you asked about my writing journey. So we talked a little bit about Reluctant Reader books already, but is there anything else you can share and just share about Reluctant Reader books as a whole and how we can kind of learn more?
Yeah, so the goal that we set out to do with Reluctant Reader books, as far as a website and in business and project, part of that is my own books.
Yeah.
But part of what we wanted to do was try and find other books that are out there that would appeal to reluctant readers in particular, and just to kids in general. Reluctant readers, there's a spectrum there of different reasons that somebody might not enjoy reading all that much. So it's kind of hard to figure out exactly what's going, to get someone to fall in love with reading. For a lot of kids, it may be something that's shorter and a little bit breezier to get through. And for some kids, it may be something that is actually quite a bit long. I mean, I know a number of kids who hated to read until they read Harry Potter, and they did make it through that. So we try to review a range of things, but we also look primarily for writers who are perhaps not as well known. I like to tell people, like, Judy Blume doesn't need my help selling books.
That's true.
She's fine. R.L. Stine doesn't need my help. It would be fun, of course, to review a number of those, but people know about a lot of those writers. So we try and look for writers where we feel like the books are really good. They would appeal to readers, and maybe people haven't heard of them quite as much, or maybe perhaps they're brand new. We reviewed a book, Three Strikes Summer, just a month or two ago, by Skylar Shrimp. Fabulous book, and it was her first book. So we kind of look for that sort of thing. And then we do interviews with writers. And initially we were only doing writers, and then I came across your podcast, and I thought, this is fantastic what this guy's doing.
Oh, thank
This
you.
blew me away. And the way that I do the interviews or the pick the interviews is usually I'm looking for just someone that I think looks like they'd be interesting to talk to, and that I'd like to know a little bit more about what they do. And um, so I said, well, hey, it's
Yeah.
my company. I can do what I want. Let's expand this. Let's see. And so we thought I'd try and see if you were up for an interview, and you were. Um, so we've been expanding that, and then we also put together resources that would be useful for teachers, because we're trying to connect with lots of teachers, because they're often the person who is going to be looking at books for kids and then taking them and handing those books to kids. So we try to be a good resource for teachers as well.
Do you have any other writing projects in the works? I'm sure we're all really intrigued to hear what's going on with your writing journey.
Yeah, I think most writers, you've got half a dozen ideas, going on at one time, and trying to figure out what to work on next, and where you're going to go with that. I have a book I've been working on for some time, the last couple of years. It's one of those, you get so far, and then I end up on something else for a while, and
Yeah.
come back to it, and end up on something else for a while. Um, but yeah, I got one that we're slowly marching forward, you know, and yeah, it's actually gonna be a Halloween novel, I think, but perhaps not quite as spooky. So
I'm really curious to know, and maybe some other writers are as well who are listening. What are some ways that you really channel that spookiness and kind of keep on writing? What are your horror, spooky, boo writing tips?
oh man, I think that for me, it's about I draw a lot of inspiration from other writers in the genre, so I always encourage people to read as broadly as possible. Um, and especially in horror, a lot of the best stuff in horror is in short fiction. So I think that if you can mine a lot of the anthologies that are out there, and a lot of the people who write short story collections and stuff, there's just so many fantastic ideas. And then there's a lot of really good horror back in the earlier eras, in like movie and Twilight Zone and those kind of things and stuff. So
In honor of October being the month of ghosts, goblins, the ghouls, I'm asking everyone I interview, what's your favorite middle grade mystery spooky? Well, no. What's your favorite middle grade spooky read?
yeah, I got a couple I'd like to share with you. I got The Haunting of Aveline Jones.
Ooh.
See if you can see my thing's blocking it out. The Haunting of Aveline Jones by Phil Hicks. He's actually writing a series, an Aveline Jones trilogy, or there's a third book coming out here pretty soon anyway. Very good ghost story. He's a fantastic writer. They do a really good job being kind of that haunted ghost story element. Phil's from Britain, although he lives here in the Pacific Northwest now, and they do ghost stories really well out there in Britain. Another really good one is the Ghouls Next Door series by Gary Ghislaine, who's a French writer, but he writes in English. It's funny, I talked to him, and he writes his books in English, and then they have to be translated back into French to be published in his own country. So, but the Ghouls Next Door, they're a lot like Goosebumps, very fast paced, lots of short chapters, but much more modern. And then I think the other one I would always tell people to read is Ray Bradbury's short stories. The October Country is particularly excellent. And even though he didn't write exclusively for kids necessarily, I think that middle grade readers can read his work quite easily. He's a
Thank you.
blast.
Thank you so much for the recommendations. My bookshelf, my book stack, and my bookshelf are gonna get a little bit higher. And
Can they get any bigger?
yeah, that's true. And since across the Atlantic Ocean, they're coming up with some spooky ideas. I guess I'll need to have some more spots of tea and some croissants.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm gonna stock up on the European food.
Yeah,
And
they got good food over there, I hear.
they do. Although I've never been there, but I guess the American style European food. That's pretty good. And
Mhm.
and now I ask every author this question, every person I interview, if you could be or meet any literary character, fictional or real. It could be an author, it could be a fictitious main character, or it could be some character in the background of a book who never speaks at all, but it's mentioned like once. Who would it be
Hmm.
and why?
Man, that's a good question. There's a lot of choices.
That's true.
That's a really good one. I think I'll take Charlie Bucket from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes.
Who wouldn't want to own a chocolate factory?
You're
And
not wrong.
my daughters are all into chocolate and baking and stuff, so I think they would. I think they'd get a kick out of that.
Well, and everybody, you can find Tyler's books on his website, reluctantreaderbooks.com, and you can also find them on Amazon and most places where books are sold. You're gonna love them. I know it. And yeah, I hope you have a great day, everybody. And you can follow Tyler's journey on his Reluctant Reader Books website, as well as on Twitter, Instagram, all the social media places. And he's there, he's posting, and he's changing the world. Thanks so much for joining me, everybody.
Thank you very much.